and it's something you and I have always made jokes about on this podcast, and as whenever we talk, and in things that we write, and things that we do, and things that we tweet, is just the general audience, the Chelsea audience, is an absolute shocker. It's a disgrace. The way that some fans or a lot of fans behave online, it's kind of like your parents would have never like shown you how to lose. That is really spoiled, and it's kind of this old mentality of, well, you have to win, otherwise you get sacked. That doesn't exist anymore. And it's you. I've actually said on the pod I do with Si that if you look at it in a much bigger context outside of football, and you look at it in terms of like societies, we in Britain right now, as you know, Daniel, because you also live in Britain, are at the sort of far tail end of a British Empire, right? That no longer exists, but there's a lot of people within these, this island that think that it does or think that it should, and that creates issues, and people have conflicting opinions, and it's a fallout of multiple managers, multiple ways of doing things, the social media age, and Chelsea being the bastion of big money have now got to the point where money's not enough because there's more than enough teams with big money. It actually really looks like what you need is competent coaching over a sustained period of time, matched by investment. And I think that's what we're doing, and we'll get onto it. But it seems very much as though the investments made are quite obviously not coming to fruition just yet, because I don't actually think they're meant to. And my biggest criticism of the ownership, because I see the ownership get criticised an awful lot, is that I think what would be really helpful is if they engaged in dialogue with the fans to say, we think of Chelsea as a Europa Conference League club this season. Next season, we'll aim for the Europa League. Next season, we'll aim for the Champions League. Because then at least if you have those ideas in place, you either buy in or don't. Whereas everyone's sort of swimming around in this sea of conspiracy and ideas, and, what essentially comes across as like anti-Americanism, which isn't actually necessarily, the American model of sports ownership isn't actually all bad, although it just conflicts with the way that we're used to it. And I think all those things are adding together right now to create something that's very, very problematic and challenging for what is the great majority of I say, well-mannered, well-tempered fans that like to believe in something. And I think that no matter what you believe in football, what you believe about Chelsea, something that's core to your belief would have been taken away. For example, us two, I think it'd be fair to say that the notion of like including Cobham in the team seems to be dissipating, and that's very tough for me. I don't want to talk for you. Whereas others will be annoyed because they think Chelsea should have the star player in the market and always bring them in, which we're also not doing, right? Both are completely acceptable ways to think, but both are not happening.
Yeah, I agree with most of that there. I think it's true that it does kind of feel very similar to what Man United have gone through over the past, like, God, how many years is it now? It's basically 10 years since they won the Premier League title.
10 years, yeah. Yeah.
So and I think they're obviously still going through it now. They're in a similar position to Chelsea, and I've compared Chelsea before to like Star Wars, in the sense that like the original Star Wars people. Now let me explain my pseudo intellectual guardian take. This is gonna make some sense. Before you stop laughing, in the sense that everyone, especially of a generation, loved the original Star Wars films, the original trilogy, and they have such fond memories. A lot of that is intertwined with people's childhood, a fonder, more innocent time, and then there's this long period. You have the prequels, which to a lot of people are absolute crap, basically. But then you have these new films where it's kind of like stick or twist, where people want their nostalgia of the past. They want the 80s to come back. They want everything they loved about that film. But then any idea of something being new is an offense to them. Like look at the reaction to The Last Jedi. Whatever you think about it, it's a rejection of trying to maybe take Star Wars in a new direction. And I feel in some ways that's what Chelsea is, because you have many. Because if you speak to 10 like different Star Wars fans, for instance, I guess you'd get different generations and like 10 different responses. Some will want Star Wars to stay the same. They'll want to just be pure nostalgia bait constantly. Some may be of a minority that wants to see new, fresh ideas. If this thing is going to, and maybe some just think it should have ended basically a long time ago. And that's where I think Chelsea are. You will speak to a lot of fans, and a lot of them, as you've just said, will have their own idea of what Chelsea should be. Some of them still think it should be 2008 and we're sacking and hiring managers. We should be buying only big players. Some feel that we've completely... I'm more of this on this like scale, if you want to call it. I'm more on the scale with you, that I think we've absolutely ruined the Cobham project, the incredible academy line that was there and set up to give us incredible players and just a sustainability. And I feel that you buy Chelsea Football Club, you have been given an absolute gift of Cobham that few owners have, and it seems like all of this new ownership wants to do with it is just take us back to a pre-2019 era where we're just using them for profit. And it's like, sure, you could do that, but for me, my retort to that is, if you're not then producing top quality football and investing in top quality players that justify selling those young players, then for me it's a stupid idea. So it is very confusing at the moment. I can't quite buy that them coming out and clarifying things is going to make any difference anymore, because I just know how social media will react. Like, look at the interview that Paul Winstanley and I think it was Lawrence Stewart did with the club, and the reaction to that. I know that wasn't video, that was just quotes, written down, so it can be a little bit different, but that was ripped apart like that, and those quotes are still being used right now. And I think unless that Todd Bowley and Ben Adibali, just the same as Winstanley and Lawrence Stewart, these people are not going to go on camera and like some hostage video and get on their knees and beg for forgiveness. Like it's not. I feel like some people probably want them to kind of be crying and sort of saying we're so. It's not. They're not going to do that, and unfortunately, because they're not going to do that, and they're going to stick by their principles and stick by their beliefs, because they're people working in like in any profession, right? Like, who wants to sit there and say I'm an absolute incompetent? I mean, maybe if you work for the PGA as well, but that's another conversation. But it's not going to. So I don't think people will get the validation what they want, because I think what they'll be told is probably what they already think and don't like. Like if they get told that it's a conference to Europa to Champions League long-term project, we know how Chelsea fans act, and they already don't like that. They don't like that messaging. So I don't think I saw Matt Law was saying, be transparent. I don't think it makes any difference.
I don't say or I don't believe that the transparency is to placate fans. I think the transparency allows you to funnel and aim your criticism at things that are entrenched and therefore can be like literally accountable. Otherwise, criticism just comes from every angle about nothing. But I think I equally think you are right. No matter what they say, they'll get shredded. But then, like, social media is an absolutely awful barometer of how anything is. So it's a terrible way to view things. You go to as many games as possible. I wish I could. Most people there will probably think differently to the way that the online fan base probably does. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's typically been the case, certainly since we've been journalists and observers in a more professional capacity. We've spoken about it at length repeatedly. But yeah, it's a very challenging dynamic. But ultimately, and equally, I think something I wanted to mention was that when you look around now at big clubs, and this notion now that I think is so useless, which is the let's sign the next superstar. Look around, right? Look around. Arsenal is a project built over time, not really signing superstars. I can't think of a single superstar they've signed. Really, I can't think of one. I've got players there, i.e. Ødegaard, who are now superstars. Saliba, now a superstar. Saka, obviously, besides Salah, probably the best winger in the Premier League. You look at City, Haaland's obviously a superstar, but is Gvardiol a superstar centre-back signing? No. Is Ruben Diaz that? No. Was John Stones that? No. Doku, no. Foden from the academy. You look at Europe. Which clubs have signed multiple superstars? Okay, Bayern Munich bought Harry Kane. No one else. Real Madrid bought Bellingham and Joselu. Like there's actually very few superstars there. You look at Atletico Madrid, who have built their squad meticulously over time. Inter have done it too. Lautaro is now a superstar. He wasn't. He is now. In my opinion, he's the best striker in the world at the moment. The notion that you simply buy and it works doesn't really exist anymore, because the model for successful football doesn't work that way. And I think like Real Madrid are a different example because they're Real Madrid, and it's just a bit different. But Chelsea aren't Real Madrid. Liverpool have been meticulous in buying players, and it works over time. Arsenal do the same, City do the same, Inter do the same. AC Milan, for example, are doing the same. Bayern Munich, outside of Harry Kane, will have done the same. I think Leroy Sané is a star signing too. But other than that, like Kim Min-jae is a wonderful centre-back. But is he a superstar signing? I don't think so. Barcelona, certainly. Lewandowski, maybe, but that's a post-prime Lewandowski. And João Felix, we have our opinions on him. You know, he's been better at Barca than he's been at any other place in his career, but I don't think he's a superstar player. Their other superstar players have either grown into that role. De Jong, because he was considered absolutely awful and now he's loved, and Pedri and Gavin, they're from the academy anyway. So the idea of let's buy superstars because each club has 3 or 4 superstars, it just doesn't exist. And it's like, okay, let's get Osimhen because he's a superstar. He's very good. He's not a superstar. He's very, very, very good. Like, there's so few superstars. Jude Bellingham is a superstar football player, right? Like, Jude Bellingham has transitioned across the leagues and just smashed it. Victor Osimhen could well be a superstar, and if he signs for Chelsea and smashes it, is guaranteed to be seen as a superstar. That's fine. But, you know, it's not been easy for him for multiple reasons. And when he's been on great form, his technique is excellent, and, you know, his finishing is outstanding, and the interplay of Kvaratskhelia and the rest is wonderful. But there's a lot to prove there. I don't think he's proven to the extent that people talk about him that he is, you know? I think there are actually very few ultra or real world-class football players at the moment generally. I mean, you only need to look at the Champions League draw at the moment to think, oh, this is not that good. It's not that strong. Or maybe that's me being, you know, top 5 league centric and not really taking into account the strength of other teams. But I think the gap between the elite and the pushing to be elite is now much smaller, both in terms of player quality and club quality. So for me, the notion that let's just sign superstars, it kind of is pointless at this point, because superstars aren't really out there. And if they are out there, you're going to have to pay 130 million per player, which is just, it's just ridiculous. It just is. Even though money doesn't really matter in football at this point, it's just silly. Like, we'll talk about Caicedo and Enzo in a minute when we get on to talking about the team. But as a sort of general overview point of the state of football, I don't see how the idea of the superstar player, just put him in the team and it works. That doesn't work anymore. Everyone is catered and specialised, and it has to be done in a certain way, right? So that's why I feel particularly remiss just at the moment, because I think it will come back into play about the Cobham stuff, because if you have that long-termism throughout the club, which I think the owners are trying to do, which is one of the positives I do see when I try not to be reactionary, is that it means that the club can level up through the academy into the first team. As we know, the academy model, like we all know how academy models work. I see great benefit in that. And, you know, whether Conor Gallagher signs his contract, obviously you and I gutted when Mason Mount left. Like, we see chat about bringing Tomori back, etc. I mean, the list is endless, and the conversation we've had is endless about this. But that to me seems now like a more feasible model. And I like signing these young talented players, but equally I think there's been a lot of in football recently, like anti or like ageism in a really bizarre way. Like 30 years old is like you're done, which is just not true. A silly example would be that I genuinely believe if we didn't get rid of Giroud to AC Milan, he could still play striker for us, and it would be totally
Mm,
feasible and fine, and it might actually allow Sterling and Mudryk to have a
mm.
slightly better time, even though Sterling's been fine. Um, there's a snobbery around certain players and then a desire to have this flashy tool. I just don't think that really exists at many clubs now, and I really don't think it works unless they're ultra proven, especially for the value. But I'd like to know what you think.
Yeah, as you were sort of explaining the thing of the superstar coming in and being kind of the one man team that changes every, it doesn't, as you mentioned, it doesn't seem to hold much weight anymore, kind of in elite football. When you think about signings that helped, say, we always use them, Liverpool and City, but I guess you can use Arsenal in the example now. But those clubs were in all ways before they got their kind of key signings were going in an upwards direction. I mean, De Bruyne was already at Man City before Guardiola arrived. Um, Jesus was bought, I believe, in his first season. Aguero obviously was already there. Phil Foden was coming through the academy. Bernardo Silva was bought in the second season, I think it was. But, as you mentioned, Bernardo Silva, the player, we all think of him as now one of the best in world football. Like, he's a just ridiculous player. No one thought of him as that when he originally signed for Manchester City way back in
Hold on, add to that as well. Like Edison was bought in 3 years after they're messing around with Bravo, and he was bought in through
Mm,
a specific specialism, which is his ability on the ball.
yeah. And then you look at, say, Liverpool, where Mo Salah, when he arrives at Liverpool in 17-18, he's done well in Serie A, but like there's still question marks about, is he ever going to turn into an amazing player? How does he react when he returns to the Premier League? Sadio Mane had sure proved himself in the Premier League, but was not deemed a
No,
ridiculous player. Roberto Firmino was already at Liverpool before Klopp arrived, and with Arsenal, sure, they bought Gabriel Jesus. They've bought, Declan Rice is probably the best signing anyone could have made over the past summer, right? I think
yeah,
we both agree with that, and have felt that for a long time.
100%.
Um, so I think in one way that kind of breaks the rule, but in a lot of ways, I think what the overall trend I see is that, and as you were explaining, is that really these players are there to upgrade on a foundation that was already kind of decent. Like, it's not, you're not coming in, you're not getting a player to make your team click. The team already clicks and just needs a better output or just needs a better player in that system. It's not the case that a player comes in. People think Osimhen will come in, and it's almost like we're relying. We think that there's this savior player out there that's going to come in and make the system, rather than finding a player that suits the system that we're building. Like, it's that kind of, it's that we still are kind of, and I think Man United are probably in the same boat of, like, we're still in this kind of 2005 to 2015, how far do you want to go, like, to cut it off? But like, say before Klopp and Guardiola arrived in the Premier League,
Yeah,
mid 2010s, there's maybe back then it's why Acosta could come in and transform things for Chelsea. It's why you could see players come in, and Eden Hazard, for instance, was very much a throwback player, and for a variety of reasons has struggled. But I don't want to go off on a tangent with different players, but it's just I do agree with you that I feel that my kind of the eyes roll to the back of my head when I hear about Osimhen and I hear about this shiny new toy. Number one, because I've seen this strategy fail quite frequently. Like, I remember when we were doing this podcast regularly, we championed the signing of Romelu Lukaku, and how tragically not tragically, he scored 15 goals, but how it went in his perception. And now you see him go to
yeah,
Roma, and it's man who scored goals for all of his career scores goals for all of his career. Like, and it looks so simple because the environment is clearly better than what it was at Chelsea. So for me, I don't trust Chelsea to make the right decision. I don't trust that Chelsea understand that dynamic and that relationship, that the foundation has to be built there. The foundation isn't, it could be built under Pochettino, but it ain't there yet. Like, I don't want to be buying the finished article or the better version of the player until I know what Chelsea is, until there is a foundation, at least a skeleton there. Then, you can start adding some meat to that bone a little bit more. because that's what the best clubs have done. Like, it's not, it's to just think we can spend our way out of this. Well, we've spent like $1 billion under this new ownership, and we're crap.